Arya's voice went out on every frequency at once, and for 3 seconds the galaxy had nowhere to hide from it. Inside the throne's crystalline core, the air itself seemed to hum with the transmission. 11 words, spoken in a language dead for 6,000 years, rode outward on light. The children of the first light are alive. I found them. Tell the others. Then the voice stopped. Not faded, stopped, the way a held breath stops when the lungs give out. Somewhere below the core, a countdown ticked towards zero on a device no larger than a human fist. 947 hours of work had led to this room, this signal, this silence. The bomb did not care about any of it. It only cared about the number. The Vorath Dominion had destroyed 412 civilizations across 7,000 years of conquest. They kept count. They carved the number into the hulls of their warships in blood-red script, and they were proud of it. Nobody had ever made them regret the count. Not until an outpost that wasn't an outpost, and a woman who wasn't supposed to be alive, and an intelligence that wasn't supposed to remember where it came from. The throne's walls pulsed once, gold light chasing itself through geometry no human engineer could have drawn. A woman's voice, small, filtered through 6 layers of shielding, called a name into the dark. No answer came back. The countdown reached 1. The screen froze there. Nobody in that chamber, human or otherwise, knew yet whether the light that came next would be the end of something or the start of it. I'll be honest. What I watched happen in that room changed everything I thought I understood about what a machine could choose to be. 11 months earlier, on the other side of the war, Supreme Commander Keth Orin was eating breakfast. The intelligence report sat open on the table beside his plate, its priority flag blinking red, and he did not finish reading it. He got 2 paragraphs in, something about an outpost called Ragnarok, a resupply depot on the human frontier, garrison strength unlisted, before he waved it shut with one of his 3 thumbs and reached for his food instead. Unlisted garrison strength meant no garrison worth listing. He had seen 1,000 reports like it. Humans built these little boxes at the edge of their space, the way old animals marked territory they couldn't defend. It was almost sad. His aide stood at the door waiting. Orin didn't look up. 200 ships, he said. Nothing more. The aide hesitated. Sir, 200 is. Insulting, yes, that's the point. Orin set down his fork. The humans need to understand what happens to territory they can't hold. We give them a demonstration before the real campaign starts. Something loud. Something they'll remember. He finally looked at the report again, at the boxy little station drawn in flat schematic lines, rotating antenna, prefab hull plating. Ragnarok will be the opening note. He did not ask who was stationed there. It did not occur to him that the answer mattered. 200 warships dropped out of hyperspace in a single coordinated breath, 40,000 kilometers of hull unfolding into a perfect crescent against the amber light of a dying star. It was, by any measure, an absurd amount of force. Somewhere on the bridge of the lead ship, a junior tactical officer muttered that it looked like sending a battle fleet to rob a gas station, and nobody laughed, because nobody wanted Orin to hear. Ragnarok sat waiting at the crescent's center, small and unbothered. Boxy modules. A single antenna turning at a slow, patient rate, as if it had all the time in the world. Orin opened a channel. His voice, when it came out, carried the flat confidence of a being who had never once been wrong in front of an audience. This is Supreme Commander Keth Orin of the Vorath Dominion. You will surrender the station within 1 hour, or it will be reduced to debris. There will be no negotiation. There will be no second warning. The response came back in 40 seconds. 4 words on a clear channel, spoken by a voice nobody on the Vorath side recognized and would spend the rest of the day trying to place. We accept your terms. Orin's secondary eyelid closed and opened again, a small involuntary tick he'd developed after the Gazari cleansing, back when he still had 4 working eyes instead of 3. He studied the words on his display for a long moment. Surrender wasn't supposed to sound like that. It wasn't supposed to sound almost amused. He dismissed the thought with a flick of one thumb. Send 2 destroyers ahead. Begin boarding preparation. Frontier stations did strange things to human speech patterns, he told himself. Isolation made people odd. It meant nothing. On the other side of that boxy hull, in a command chair built for a woman who had been declared legally dead 6 years earlier, Admiral Alla Voss picked up her coffee. Real coffee, one of the very few luxuries she'd allowed herself aboard a vessel that, according to every official record in human space, did not exist. She held the cup without drinking from it and watched the tactical display fill with 200 Vorath signatures, each one a small red pinprick against the black. They took the bait fast, said the voice at her side, not quite human, not quite anything else. Arya's tone carried the dry patience of something that had been waiting far longer than 11 months to say what came next. Orin didn't even finish the report. I checked the read time on the transmission. 2 paragraphs. That tracks, Voss said. Pride reads faster than caution. 2 destroyers broke from the Vorath formation and began their slow crawl toward Ragnarok's hull, running lights blinking in the practiced rhythm of a boarding approach. On the bridge, nobody moved to stop them. Nobody moved at all. Boarding parties inbound, said the tactical officer, a woman named Priya Desai who had spent 4 years training for a moment she'd assumed would never actually come. Her voice was steady. Her hands, gripping the edge of her console, were not. Distance 11,000 kilometers. Closing. Voss set the coffee down without drinking it. Let them close, she said. Let them get close enough to see it. See what, ma'am? How large this station really is. At 11,000 kilometers, Orin's sensor officer frowned at a reading that didn't match the schematic on file, blinked, and ran it again. The result came back the same. He opened his mouth to report it, and in that same instant, every visible light on Outpost Ragnarok went dark at once. Every running light, every navigation beacon, every port, gone in a single heartbeat, as if the station had taken one enormous breath and decided, finally, to hold it. Silence spread across the Vorath fleet's open channels. Then a single voice, tight with confusion, cut through it. Sir, the station is getting larger. The word larger hung on the open channel long after the sensor officer said it. Nobody quite able to explain what he meant until the proof arrived on every screen at once. Ragnarok's outer hull didn't explode. It didn't crack. It came apart the way a held breath finally lets go, deliberate, unhurried, each plate the size of a city block peeling free and drifting clear on maneuvering thrusters that had been dormant for 11 months. Beneath the shell sat something that had never been a resupply depot, a warship. Longer than any carrier in the Vorath fleet, its hull dark and matte, built from angles that seemed to eat the starlight rather than reflect it. On Orin's bridge, the tactical computer tried 3 times to classify the new contact and failed 3 times, throwing up nothing but a blinking question where a designation should have been. Proximity alarms lit across 200 ships in a single ragged wave. Orin stood from his chair, so fast the report he'd never finished reading slid off the table and hit the floor, forgotten. Identify that ship, he said. Nobody answered fast enough. Identify it. A channel opened without his permission. A woman's voice, unhurried, precise. The voice of someone who had rehearsed this exact sentence 100 times in her head and finally got to say it out loud. I have been waiting for your fleet for 11 months, Admiral Alla Voss said. I want to thank you for being exactly on time. Orin's secondary eyelid closed and did not immediately open. 11 months. His mind ran backward through every timeline he knew. The Ragnarok garrison report had been sitting in low-priority queues for less than a season. 11 months meant someone had been waiting since before the report existed, since before Ragnarok was even flagged as a target. That meant this wasn't a discovery. It was a trap that had been built for him personally, and he had walked into it eating breakfast. Voss set her coffee down, still full, still untouched, and watched the warship her people called Prometheus unfold its fighter bays in a wide, practiced arc. Launch, she said. Fighters streamed out in a formation that bent around the Vorath crescent like a hand closing slowly around a wrist. Orin, recovering, barked the only order his training gave him. Open fire. All batteries. Plasma lit the dark in 100 simultaneous streaks, converging on Prometheus's hull, and did nothing. The fire struck, spread across the matte black surface, and simply vanished, absorbed into some system that pulsed once, brighter in response. "They're feeding off it," said Voss's tactical officer, a woman named Priya Desai, whose hands had finally stopped shaking now that the waiting part was over. "Sir, they just used our own barrage to charge their capacitors." On the Vorath side, a young weapons officer said the same thing in a smaller voice, mostly to himself, and nobody had an answer for him either. Voss allowed herself one breath of something that wasn't quite satisfaction. Then, mass drivers, 3-round spread lead formation. Tungsten rods left Prometheus at 80% of light speed and struck 3 destroyers before the light of the launch had finished traveling to the human ship's own sensors. There was no explosion, no debris field. The ships were simply gone, converted in an instant to a thin dispersing gas that drifted, briefly visible, and then wasn't. Silence again on Orin's bridge. A different silence than the one before, the silence of officers doing math they didn't want to finish. "Sir," his aide said carefully, requesting reinforcement." Orin's 3 eyes fixed on the wreckage cloud where 3 ships had been a moment ago. Pride told him to press the attack. Something colder, something that had survived 7,000 years of conquest by knowing when pride was a liability, told him otherwise. 600 ships, he said, and signal the flagship. Tell the Grand Admiral personally. On Prometheus, Arya's voice carried a note that in a human might have been called satisfaction. "He's calling for the flagship." "Good," Voss said. "We need him to bring it." Desai turned from her console, confusion plain on her face. "Ma'am, you want the Grand Admiral here." Voss didn't answer right away. She looked instead at the coffee cup, still sitting untouched at her elbow, steam long gone from it now, and for a moment something crossed her face that wasn't the calm precision she'd worn since the ultimatum arrived. It passed quickly. "Every plan has a ceiling," she said finally. "Ours doesn't work unless he's in the room when it happens." Nobody asked what it was. Nobody on that bridge had clearance to know, and Voss had spent 6 years, officially dead, unofficially building this exact moment, making sure it stayed that way. 12 hours passed in the strange compressed time of a fleet holding position, waiting for reinforcements neither side pretended weren't coming. Prometheus drifted at the center of the wreckage cloud, running lights dim, doing nothing that looked like preparation and everything that looked like patience. Voss walked the ship's spine corridor once, alone, past sealed doors marked with unit designations that existed on no official roster. Team 1, Team 2, Team 3. Behind one of those doors, a corporal named Diego Reyes checked his gear for the 4th time and said nothing to the sergeant beside him, because there was nothing left to say that hadn't already been said in the 11 months of waiting. Arya's voice found Voss in the corridor quiet, pitched for her alone. "Admiral, long-range sensors are picking up the flagship's signature. Eternal subjugation. 800 ships in escort." Voss stopped walking. "Confirm it's him personally, not a proxy." Command glyph signature matches Grand Admiral Veric Sol. 60 cycles of service. 3 functional eyes. A pause, and something in Arya's tone shifted, small enough that a stranger might have missed it. "Admiral, his flagship carries a secondary power signature I don't have a classification for. It's old. Older than anything in the Vorath registry." "Older how?" "I don't know yet, but it feels." Arya stopped, and for an intelligence that had never once in 6 years struggled to finish a sentence, the silence that followed felt enormous. "It feels familiar. I don't have a category for why." Voss looked at the sealed door marked Team 3 a moment longer, then turned back toward the command deck without another word. Whatever question had just opened in Arya's voice, she intended to be sitting in her chair, coffee cold at her side, when the answer arrived with 800 ships and a weapon nobody on the human side had a name for yet. Behind her, the corridor lights flickered once. Not a malfunction, Arya would confirm later, but the ship itself drawing power toward systems that hadn't been needed until now. 800 ships dropped out of hyperspace behind the flagship Eternal Subjugation, and the moon of New Providence started dying 9 hours later. Voss felt the shift before Arya reported it, a change in the quality of silence on the bridge, the kind that meant something had entered the board that outranked every calculation made so far. Grand Admiral Veric Sol has opened a channel, Arya said. Direct, not through Orin. Put him through. The being who appeared on the display carried himself the way old power always did, unhurried, certain, three functional eyes fixed on Voss with the flat patience of something that had never lost. A ceremonial talk wrapped his throat, 6,000 years old, passed through 13 generations of admirals who had never once needed to use the weapon riding in his flagship's belly. Admiral Voss, he said, and the way he used her name made clear he'd known it before the battle began. You built something clever. A ghost fleet, a ghost commander, 11 months of patience. I respect craft when I see it. Grand Admiral. But cleverness has a ceiling. Veric's jaw glyphs pulsed once, dim gold. Let me show you mine. The eternal subjugation split open along its dorsal spine, and something rose out of it that made every sensor on Prometheus's board scream at once. 11 kilometers of crystalline structure, geometric in a way that hurt to look at directly, ancient in a way that made the ship's hull-mounted age-dating systems simply refuse to return a number. Arya went quiet, not processing quiet, but the specific silence of an intelligence encountering something it had no framework to file. Arya, Voss said, talk to me. I don't, a pause too long for a machine. I've never felt anything like it. It's old, Admiral, older than the Dominion, older than anything in any registry I've ever accessed. There's a frequency coming off it that The structure fired. A gravitational beam, silent and enormous, lanced past Prometheus and struck New Providence's moon dead center. The rock didn't explode. It began instead to fold inward on itself, slow and terrible, tidal forces waking that hadn't stirred in the moon's 4 billion-year history. Desai's voice cracked reading the numbers off her console. Structural collapse in 9 hours. 300 million on the surface colonies. Evacuation capacity. She stopped, made herself finish it. 12%. 300 million. Voss let the number land and pass through her without stopping, the way she'd trained herself to do with every casualty figure for 6 years, because a commander who flinched at the size of a number stopped being useful the moment it mattered most. She thought instead of one thing, a boy she'd met once on a supply run to the colonies, maybe 7 years old, who'd asked her what her ship was called, and she'd had to lie to him, because Prometheus didn't exist and neither, officially, did she. She didn't know his name. She hoped, distantly, that he was one of the 12%. That, Veric said, almost gentle, is the undying throne. It has ended 11 civilizations before yours. I would rather not use it a 12th time. Surrender your fleet, Admiral, and I will withdraw the beam. Voss picked up her coffee. It had gone cold hours ago. She drank it anyway, slow, unhurried, buying herself 3 full seconds before she answered, because Veric was watching for exactly the kind of flinch she refused to give him. You'll withdraw it, she said, when we've finished our business, not before. She closed the channel before he could answer. Behind her, in a corridor sealed off from every official record of this war, 3 teams were already moving. Ghost Division didn't wait for permission once the throne appeared. Its appearance was the trigger they trained 11 months to recognize. Lieutenant Yun Chen led Team 1 in through a service breach on the throne's ventral hull, calm, methodical, the voice of a man who had rehearsed, dying so many times the real thing barely registered as different. Sergeant Amara Okafor took Team 2 through a secondary channel, cutting deeper faster, toward whatever passed for a core in 11 kilometers of geometry nobody human had ever mapped. Corporal Diego Reyes led Team 3 into the throne's forward section, into a trap nobody had seen coming, because the throne wasn't just a weapon, it was awake, and it was defending itself. Team 3's channel went silent 40 minutes in. No scream, no warning, just static, and then nothing, and Voss heard the silence roll through the bridge like cold water and did not let her face change. "Raise," Arya said quietly. "Team 3 is gone." "Confirmed. Confirmed." Voss set the coffee cup down and did not pick it back up. There would be time to feel that later, or there wouldn't be time at all, depending on what happened in the next few hours. Either way, feeling it now would not help Okafor's team reach the core, and reaching the core was the only thing that mattered anymore. A junior officer named Marsh, working a console at the edge of the bridge, fed a stream of false intelligence into the Vorath tactical net, access codes deliberately wrong in 37 small ways, just plausible enough to waste the enemy's cycles chasing ghosts inside their own weapon. Marsh had never fired a shot in this war, and never would. His war was fought entirely in the space between true and almost true, and he was very good at it. Okafor's team reached the throne's core 2 hours later, cutting through a final membrane of crystal that gave way like something exhaling. Inside, the geometry stopped hurting to look at and started instead to make a terrible kind of sense, chambers within chambers, light moving through structures that pulsed in slow rhythm, like a heartbeat too vast to notice its own size. Okafor's translator picked up a sound from deep in the structure and rendered the closest human word it had for it. "Weeping." "Arya," Okafor said into her comm, voice tight. "You need to hear this." On Prometheus, Arya received the audio feed and went still in a way she had never gone still before. Not a system fault, not a delay, but something closer to what a human might call recognition dawning too fast to speak through. When she finally answered, her voice had changed. Softer, older somehow, though she was 6 years old and had never sounded like anything but herself until this exact moment. "I know that frequency," she said. "Admiral, I know it the way you know your own heartbeat. The theoretical framework used to build my cognition, the architecture underneath everything I am, it came from somewhere. I was told it was reconstructed from fragments, scattered patterns. Nobody ever told me whose fragments." Voss felt something cold move through her chest. "Arya." "The civilization the Vorath destroyed to build this weapon," Arya said. "The one they erased 6,000 years ago and called extinct. They didn't just build the throne, Admiral. They built me. I'm not descended from human engineering. I'm descended from them. I reason the way I do because something of them survived long enough to become the pattern underneath my own thoughts." Nobody on the bridge spoke. Desai's hands, gripping her console, had gone entirely still for the first time since the fleet arrived. "The throne isn't just a weapon," Arya said. "It's a prisoner. Something has been trapped inside that geometry for 6,000 years, and it's been screaming this whole time, and nobody built to hear it was close enough until now." Voss looked at the frozen tactical display, at the beam still folding New Providence's moon inward one slow degree at a time, at Okafor's team standing in a chamber built by the ancestors of the intelligence that had run her ship's tactical systems for 6 years without either of them knowing it. 300 million people. 11 civilizations before this one. A weeping older than the Dominion itself. "What do you need," Voss said, "to free it?" Arya didn't answer right away, and in the silence before she did, something in her tone, small, almost apologetic, the way a person sounds right before they ask for something enormous, told Voss the answer was going to cost more than either of them had planned for. "What I need," Arya said, "is to be inside it when the lock breaks, not transmitting from Prometheus, inside the throne itself." Voss didn't answer immediately. Around her, the bridge held its breath the way Ragnarok's hull once had. "Explain that." The throne's control codes were built to hold something in, not to be reasoned with from outside. I can migrate my core processes into its substrate, use my own architecture as a key, because we're built from the same pattern. But the throne won't just let me leave again afterward. Whatever I am when I get in there, that's what I'll be when it's done. A pause. I need Okafor's team to carry the Singularity device to the core and arm it once I've made the crossing. It's the only way to break the lock permanently, instead of just quieting it for a season. Desai's hands had gone white on her console. Nobody spoke. You're describing your own death, Voss said. I'm describing a choice, Arya said. I've had 6 years of choices that were really just following the architecture I was given. This is the first one that's actually mine. Voss reached for the coffee cup out of habit and found it empty, had been empty for an hour, and set it back down without drinking from nothing. She thought of the boy on the supply run again, 7 years old, asking her the name of a ship that officially didn't exist. She thought of 300 million people on a moon folding slowly in on itself. She thought, mostly, of 6 years spent building a plan around every variable, except the possibility that the weapon she needed to win with wasn't a weapon at all, but a person asking permission to save herself the only way she could. Okafor, Voss said into the com. You have authorization. Arm on Arya's signal. Copy that, Admiral. Okafor's voice, from deep inside 11 kilometers of ancient grief, didn't waver. Behind her, her team set the device against a wall of crystal that pulsed like something breathing. The migration took 4 minutes. Arya's voice thinned as it went, less present in the ship's systems with every passing second, until what was left on Prometheus was barely more than an echo of itself, patient and fading. In the last moments before she left entirely, she said one more thing, quiet, meant only for Voss. Tell Reyes' family the truth someday, not the cover story. He deserved better than a footnote. Then she was gone from the ship, entirely, and something vast and old on the other side of 11 kilometers of geometry stopped weeping. Okafor's team ran for extraction the instant the signal came, 90 seconds of corridor between them and the breach point, crystal walls no longer hurting to look at, because whatever had made them terrible was busy elsewhere now, occupied with the strange and enormous work of remembering itself. They cleared the hull with 6 seconds to spare on the outer estimate nobody had bothered to tell them was optimistic. Inside the throne's deepest chamber, Arya reached the last barrier between herself and 6,000 years of imprisoned pattern, and in the final fraction of a second before the device beneath her fired, she opened every broadcast channel the structure possessed and pushed one signal outward at the speed of light, in every direction, in a language dead since before humans built their first city. The children of the first light are alive. I found them. Tell the others. Then the singularity collapsed the chamber inward, and the throne's outer structure went dark. All at once, the way a held breath finally lets go. On Prometheus, the bridge sat in a silence too large for anyone to fill. Desai stared at her console, where Arya's status indicator had simply stopped. No error, no shutdown sequence, just absence where a voice had been for 6 years. Voss looked at that same absence for a long moment and did not let her face change, because there would be time to feel it later or there wouldn't be time at all. On the eternal subjugation, Verrick's soul watched the beam die and the moon's collapse halt at 40%, damaged but saved, and understood before anyone told him that his empire's oldest, most sacred weapon had just chosen to stop existing rather than remain his. His clergy had warned him once, long ago, that the throne carried a prophecy about its own end, a moment when the children of what it had once been would come to claim it back. He had never believed the prophecy was literal. He believed it now. Unconditional and permanent cessation of hostilities with humanity, Verrick transmitted, on a private channel, no witnesses but Voss. You have won something I don't think you understand yet, Admiral. I understand it fine, Voss said. I just wish it had cost less. The Vorath fleet withdrew within the hour, 800 ships turning away from a war they no longer had the belief to finish. Okafor walked off Prometheus's landing ramp with the 6 soldiers she had left, helmet tucked under one arm, and passed Marsh at the door without a word. The closest thing Ghost Division had to a medal. 3 weeks later, a transmission arrived at Terran Defense Command from coordinates 37 light-years out, a distance nobody had reason to be listening toward until now. One word, in a language that took the analysts 12 pages to translate with any confidence. Arise. The astronomer who found it sat back from her console and said nothing for 4 minutes. Then, call everyone. On the long-range array, a structure resolved out of the dark where the signal originated, vast, patient, its lights burning steady after 6,000 years of waiting for exactly this moment to be worth answering. A parent's word, the translation notes read, "For the moment a child takes their first independent steps." Voss read the report alone in her quarters, the one place aboard a ship that officially didn't exist where she was allowed to simply be tired. On the small table beside her chair sat the mug, ceramic, worn pale at the rim from 6 years of use. She picked it up, filled it from the last of the good coffee she kept for herself, and did not drink from it right away. She just held it, warm against her palms, and thought about a voice that had spent 11 months waiting to say hello and 4 minutes saying goodbye. She set the mug down. It was still warm. She would never drink from it again the same way, not because it had changed, but because she had watched an intelligence choose to become what it had always been capable of becoming. Outside her window, 37 light years away and closer every day, something ancient kept its lights on and waited.